Here, the attorney gasps. I just session of the City Commission meeting to order. Would you please join me in the flag, sir?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're pleased to have the opportunity of having our new Clackamas Fire District 1 Fire Chief to come and speak to us, and would ask you to come forward. Had the chance to meet you briefly at the retirement celebration of our former chief.
We have had a lot of celebrations, that is for sure. Thank you, Mayor Neely, members of council. I just wanted to spend a few minutes tonight, and I know your time is valuable, and just introduce who I am, a little bit about my background, and then sort of the 30,000-foot view for Clackamas Fire, with the hopes of engaging this group on a more regular basis. So, again, my name is Fred Charlton, and although I'm new to this body, I've worked in the fire district since 1994 and have worked in various facets of our organization, and have had the great honor, July 1st, to be the 5th fire chief that Clackamas Fire has had. So, as Mayor Neely alluded to, Chief Kirchhofer retired June 30th after 34 years of service. Still lives in the community. I know he's a big part of the community, and as I understand, he's vacationing right now for 2 weeks in Italy. So the smile on his face is pretty big. So, anyway, he served as our chief for 6 years, and I was very honored to be mentored under his leadership. And I continue to vow to you to increase the relationship that the fire district has with Oregon City, and continue to fulfill all of the obligations and things that we've said we're going to do. So, organizational focus. I just had a few things to talk briefly about. First is really working collaboratively, and I think we've done a good job in Oregon City, and I really feel that our firefighters and our staff are part of the community. We've worked well with Oregon City Police, and we've partnered on a mobile command unit for major incidents, and we've looked at other opportunities where we can bring our services together, and I think that's important. Currently, we're working very closely with the Boring Fire District, and although they're a long way from the city of Oregon City, we've done something very unique, which is we've combined our volunteer forces, and we have over 150 community volunteers now between the two organizations. And many of those volunteers will respond out of Station 16 up on Hilltop. So again, really looking across the region on ways that we can gain efficiency is critically important to my staff and I. Next is succession planning, and we've spent a lot of time preparing for the fire chief's retirement. My view of succession planning goes much deeper than that. I think that we have a lot of tenured employees that are going to be leaving the organization very soon, and it's my job to make sure that we're prepared to have new leaders step into those roles. And we're working very hard across all ranks. So it's not just the firefighters, it's staff, human resources, finance director. We're looking at all key positions to move the organization forward and how we can succession plan for them. The next is really gain some fiscal efficiency, if you will, and we struggle, as many agencies, with rise in employment costs and materials and services, and we're looking critically at our budgets moving forward and sort of the 5-year future of the fire district and how we can gain some efficiency there. So we've been very fiscally conservative in years past, and we'll continue that. But we want to make sure that we can fulfill the mission and meet the needs of the community and not have any major issues moving forward. The next is long-range capital replacement needs, and we're going to enter into some discussions about long-range master planning. And we went before the voters back in 2001, and we passed a $9 million bond, and that is due to retire in 2015. And we have some needs. We have some needs for fire stations, a training center, a fleet facility. We have some aging fire apparatus that we'll need to retire in the next couple of years. So you may hear from me again when we get closer to looking at our future capital needs and needing some support from the community. And lastly is just reaffirming our commitment to our strategic business plan. And we went through a process in 2009. We brought in about 40 internal stakeholders and developed a living document, our strategic business plan, and just making sure that doesn't just sit on a shelf, that we take it out and we meet the needs and we move the organization forward and use that as our guiding principle. The last piece I want to talk about is really the community engagement piece that I'm so proud of in our public education, and that is really where the fire service starts. Excuse me, let's not stop it there. Oops. I've said it before, and not before this group, but really, when a resident calls 911, to me, that really puts us in a reactive response mode. It's not proactive. So if somebody has a medical emergency, has a fire, has a car accident, I really feel like we've lost an opportunity to get out in front of that and really make a difference to make the community safer. So we talk a lot about public education. We talk about our safety fairs, but really we respond to about 17,000 emergencies a year. And I tell our men and women professional firefighters, that's 17,000 opportunities to engage the public. So we're really looking at a strategy on public engagement, how we can get out and really talk about those fire life safety issues that are critically important to the fire district. I think you've probably seen an email, or if you haven't, you will, about asking all of you to come out on a new rescue boat that we purchased. And I think it's important that when we have these large capital purchases that make a difference in the community, we allow elected officials certainly the opportunity to come out. So we're going to have boat rides set up in September. A new piece for us, and you'll get tired of hearing from the fire district, I think, in short order, but we're going to host a community academy in October. And I think it's important to have the community come out to our training center and spend a couple hours with our professional firefighters and work through some of the hands-on tasks that we ask our men and women to do every day and really have that engagement piece. I think it's one thing for me to sit before you and talk about what we do, but it's much different if you hear from a newly hired firefighter or someone that's been in our organization for 30 years. So that's sort of the 30,000-foot view for Clackamas Fire. I'm proud to be the fifth fire chief, as I said, and certainly if you have any questions for me, and one thing I would ask is an opportunity to come before you again in the future and really make sure that you know the direction that we're going, and any questions we can be very transparent and answer them as needed. So.
That's great.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
I think I sent a reply. It turns out those first couple of weeks in September I'm really tied up in things, and I'm afraid I won't be able to make one of those tours, but maybe if there's a later opportunity, I'm sure there will be.
I think there will be.
Great.
And if you're on the river and you call 911, you can always get a phone.
You don't want to do
That's
that.
not how we like to see it.
I do have another question, and I know you, what do you call it, the NERT program?
CERT?
CERT.
Community Emergency Response Team.
Yeah. And I know that there was activities there when we had our last fire chief that was part of the Oregon City Fire District. Well, our own fire chief,
Right.
I guess I should say. It was a major thing that they were working through the neighborhood associations and having certification occur and so forth. How do you see that program evolving here?
Well, I think that program continues to grow. So we have very active CERT members in Oregon City, the city of Milwaukee, and Happy Valley. And for a period of time, I think some of the interest in that program shifted a little bit internally for us as we move staff around. Back in March, we hired a new emergency manager, and he has a lot of interest and passion for really developing our citizens to act and react in that first 72 hours, because we all know that if we have a major event, fire is not going to be able to respond to every emergency. So those 17,000 emergencies, we're going to have to pick and choose the few that we go on. So I think it's critically important to engage the community and really taking care of themselves, taking care of their families, taking care of their neighborhoods.
Because I think some of us in our lifetime may see that catastrophic event off our coast occur, and we may be facing a major earthquake in which people are going to individually have to respond to shutting off gas lines and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
just one last safety point for you. I would be remiss if I didn't add this. You've seen on the news, but we're really moving into a time of severe fire weather tonight and moving into tomorrow, when we put a lot of restrictions on open burning in the fire district. But I would just ask you and your neighbors, friends, and family, caution you with an open flame. The next couple of days, it's going to be over 100 degrees, and if we get a little bit of east wind, it's going to make fire conditions pretty difficult here in the fire district. So please be careful.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your coming out. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Great.
With that, we go into an added item. before we adopt our agenda, I think David Frazier wanted to make a presentation at this time while we had a lot of the citizens here on the urban renewal bonds and the issue that's before us.
All right. This item, this is about the urban renewal ballot measure, the citizen initiative, and some discrepancy that really discovered late yesterday afternoon. And I was going to have this on my reports at the end of the meeting, but I thought that it would be, because it's a fairly complex issue, that it might be better to walk you through it when you're fresh in the meeting. So essentially, as you know, this measure has been will be referred to the voters, and the citizens that initiated this have basically used almost verbatim, and I discovered this yesterday afternoon, they used verbatim the previous advice from our city attorney about 18 months or so ago. The city attorney had written the then commission a memorandum explaining how the commission could essentially refer something to the ballot so that voters would be approving urban renewal debt. And the challenge was for the city attorney that you have an urban renewal commission that has a certain amount of autonomy from the city commission, and to what extent can the city commission curtail the activities of the urban renewal commission. That was then. This is now. You may have a different focus, but nevertheless, the citizens, I think, seized upon that language and that work product and then created this measure. So the difficulty we have, and Ed's going to walk you through his memo because he's got a memo on this that it was on your screen, but we essentially have a ballot title here. And the ballot title, do all of you have this? I think you all have this.
9A.
Does everybody have it? 9A?
I'll pass it out now.
Okay. I want you to look at that ballot title because that is actually what will be on the ballot as opposed to what will be in the voter's pamphlet. Okay?
Oh, this is what I was afraid of.
And my concern here is about whether, well, it's just to the extent to which this situation is misleading to the public and even whether it's misleading to the petitioners. The commissioners will recall at the last meeting there was testimony by the petitioners of what their intent was with this measure.
Yes.
And you will also recall that there was testimony that the intent was that future urban renewal activities would be subject to voter approval if there was debt incurred.
Right.
And that is actually what the ballot measure says, or
Yes.
the ballot title.
Yes.
Okay, and this is what has already been referred, and the time in which to remedy this has lapsed.
Yes.
So we have ballot title that says, and I'm going to quote there's a caption that says, requires voter approval for urban renewal bonds. The inconsistent part is this question, which unfortunately I'm afraid many voters read and stop there. The question says, shall city charter be amended so that future urban renewal plans require voter approval for bond issuance? Now, the city attorney today has talked to me in great detail about his interpretation of what this means. And his interpretation is not that this is urban renewal plans. Plans meaning you currently have an urban renewal plan, but Eric is working on projects,
Right.
specific projects, and some of them are already in your capital improvements plan on your capital projects list. So this is one of the documents, and that sentence there under question is the one that I want you to pay attention to. Now that has to be contrasted against what the actual charter language in the ballot, in the measure says that is not on the ballot. Only this ballot title, which is supposed to describe the actual language that the petitioners are trying to accomplish that goes into your city charter. So there are sections A, B, C, and D in this language. It's all on one page. Do you all have that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you look down at subsection B there, or section B, each urban renewal plan of the agency that exists on the effective date of this section is hereby amended to add the following provision. And then it talks about the bond restrictions without a vote of the public. So effectively what B does is B refers to all of your current and future urban renewal plans and projects.
And projects.
And any debt associated therewith. The problem is But the ballot title that the voters see says Future Urban Renewal Plans.
Yes, and that's what,
So this
Yes.
is different than this. And if my concern here is to the extent to which a defective ballot title ends up misleading voters about what they're accomplishing. And just as importantly, when I say voters, I'm also talking about the petitioners who were here telling us that their intent was to restrict or modify the use of debt in future urban renewal
future.
plans. And
nothing with current is
but
what they said,
the language they actually submitted,
is current.
taken from the city attorney's memo from about 18 months ago, includes current urban renewal
Yeah,
plans. So this is a problem.
This is a mess.
And the problem is, well, I'm going to let Ed kind of get into that because he has a memorandum, but the city, one of the remedies Ed mentioned to me today was the possibility of the city submitting an explanatory statement. The explanatory statement goes in the voter's pamphlet, not with the ballot title.
And who's going to read that?
Well,
Whoever wants to.
geeks like me would read it, but the typical
But
voter,
the
I don't know.
general population would not.
This is what I was concerned about.
Yes.
Right. So we have a handful, very, very limited opportunities to remedy this. One of the things Ed mentioned to me today was the possibility of submitting, you'll recall from those of you who read voters' pamphlets, there's usually an explanatory statement, not always, but there's an explanatory statement that can be drafted with public funds by the local government in which the measure is situated, and that is supposed to be a neutral and objective statement.
Right.
Neither for nor against, but it's explanatory. It explains this is the effects, this is what it does, what it doesn't do. In this case, it might say, the first sentence might be something like, you'll see a discrepancy between the ballot title and the measure. But
they
you'll
can
have to
see
look
it.
closely to see it.
Yeah.
So there could be an explanation like that, and then it will explain what the measure does and what it doesn't do. Okay. In order for the city to adopt an explanatory statement, the commission has to approve that. And in order for the commission to approve that, the commission has to have an ordinance requiring an explanatory statement. The city of Oregon City does not have such an ordinance in its code today. You can have one in there by the September 9th deadline. That's the deadline for which... 6th. I'm sorry, I got the 9 and the 6 turned around. So the 6th is the deadline, and we can probably get an ordinance for you. It's not particularly complicated to require an explanatory statement, and that would be in your code. And then if you pass that ordinance, then you could also at the same time have an explanatory statement submitted. However, again, you're only going to get limited explanatory value because you've got a ballot title that's essentially defective. That's the situation we're facing.
I have a question that needs to clarify this for me. It says, each urban renewal plan of the agency that exists on the effective date of this section. What does that mean? What is the effective date?
It will likely be around December 6th.
And how do we
of this
determine
year.
that?
The commission has to, within 30 days of the election, canvass the results. And that usually happens at the first or second meeting in December.
Okay. So it would affect any, do we have any?
I'll give you an example, a live one. You're currently negotiating with Cove developers on that major Cove housing project at the Cove. You're going to have a commitment, significant commitment through a DDA and whatever documents bond counsel requires to say we're committed, and that will have to be in place before this ballot measure would go into effect, or if it isn't in effect by then it has to be referred to the voters.
Okay. Can you give me another one?
Well, we don't have anything else currently that we're in negotiations with, but anything else, for example, is the Rossman landfill, any developments currently in your existing urban renewal plan that would come forward in the future after that thing goes into effect, that measure, would require voter approval of it for indebtedness. And that means no matter how big the project is or how small, unless there are some exceptions if it can be done in 1 year and so forth, and that's what I'm going to let Ed talk to you about. He does have a memo, and I'm going to turn it over to him at this point.
So I guess my question is this something that the city commission necessarily feels the responsibility to address, or do we? There's going to be pros and cons to this ballot anyway. There's going to be camps and campaigns on either side. I can't imagine that the people campaigning against this ballot title wouldn't be, sharing this information and telling this information. So I guess the question is, do we as a city have to try to correct that, or should we let that come out with?
Well, to back up a little
process,
bit, the statute requires that the city attorney be responsible for preparing the ballot
Right,
title.
so we want to make sure.
So we've got that responsibility,
Okay.
and in a perfect world, we would want to prepare an accurate
Yes.
ballot
Right.
title.
Absolutely.
That's not what we have. So we can ask the city attorney in more detail about what remedies are available for a defective ballot title, but I think he is prepared to talk to you about that.
I've got a list of people to speak. Would we want to have the attorney speak to
Yes,
this first?
Yes.
I
Is
would,
that right?
please.
Okay.
You have both a memo and 3 attachments to that memo. And it gives a chronological history of where we got to where we are. In 2007, there was an initiative petition that tried to amend the charter to require a vote on urban renewal bonds. We sought and got an opinion from bond counsel saying that can't be done because the charter can't regulate the urban renewal agency because it is a separate municipal corporation. In January 2011, at the first meeting of the new commission, a majority of the commission gave us direction to assure that urban renewal bonds would be referable to the voters as a precondition. We then worked with bond counsel Harvey Rogers to draft a charter amendment that would do it. You have in the second item, which was an email in January, the beginnings of looking first at could the charter require a vote for an urban renewal funding, and the answer is no, and remains no, because of the separation of municipal corporations. However, we devised something which took advantage of the intersection of the Urban Renewal Commission and the City Commission, which was that any urban renewal plan had to get City Commission approval. So what the charter amendment did was to say for all future urban renewal plans and for existing urban renewal plans, there is a requirement that before the urban renewal plan can be adopted and sent back to the agency for implementation, there has to be a vote on any bond financing. And that's what was done. Ultimately, the commission at that time did not adopt those amendments. Nevertheless, as the manager said, 3 citizens got together, took the same material, and put an initiative petition together. Our office did prepare the ballot title. I wasn't there at the time, but it was prepared, and it was sent to the city. The law provides for a 10-day period after the recorder gives notice for anybody to object to the ballot title. That 10-day period passed and nobody objected. Okay. The petitioners then circulated the petition with both the ballot title and the underlying charter amendment proposal in it. Now, I don't know who reads what in looking at those things, but both of those items were circulated, or at least that's what has been certified to us by the petitioners and their agents. In August of this year, the petitioners submitted the signatures to the city recorder. The city recorder sent them to the county. There were enough signatures to put it on the ballot. So the measure will go to the voters, and what you did last meeting was to authorize that to be done. You couldn't do anything differently. And I know there were dissenting votes and all that, but you're under a duty to send that to the voters. And because the original ballot title was not challenged, it is required to be used as part of this sending to the voters. There are two issues here. The first has to do with the scope of the amendatory charter provisions. The way the charter is drafted, any bonded indebtedness, unless it is excluded, must be approved by the voters, and that is any indebtedness that goes for more than 1 year. You can do 1-year borrowings, it's not covered. Okay? So short-term borrowings are all right. Refinancing existing obligations are all right. You don't need to go to the voters for that. The difficulty is the contracts clause of the federal Constitution and also an analogy in the Oregon Constitution, that you can't interfere with existing contracts. Bonds are contracts. So the idea was, don't deal with bonds that are already issued or bonds that have to be issued to deal with existing financial obligations. And that's what we excluded. Now, by implication, anything else is covered. If it's after the effective date, if there's not an obligation to which this financial requirement to repay is attached to, it is subject to popular approval. So the only exception from the usual vote requirement, besides the ones I've given you, is a written agreement entered into before the effective date of the measure. And as I've indicated to you, that will likely be around December 6th, give or take a few days, depending upon the commission meeting at which you canvass the results. If there is a DDA in place, has binding financial commitments, it is exempt from that. I understand you have the possibility of a DDA coming before you, and if that DDA is adopted before December, you can use bonds to finance it. For any new plans, for any amendments to existing plans, and for most things that are large in scope, you're going to have to adopt an amendment to the urban renewal plan. They would be directly subject to the vote requirement if this passes. Okay? Second question has to do with the ballot title. And you saw the language which talks about future urban renewal plans, and that's the word at issue. As I said, I didn't write the ballot title, and the person who did so is out until tomorrow, so I can't ask him. But, and while I might have written it differently, the ballot title is what it is. And we all have that before us. There's a limited amount of words that you can use to describe what's in the ballot measure. The assumption is that people will read the measure and make their decision on the measure rather than the ballot title. That may or may not be realistic, but that's the way it is. And while I'm speculating, it may be that because all urban renewal plans are amended by virtue of the measure, if it's adopted, any future urban renewal plan is subject to the vote requirement. Only new commitments would be subject to voter approval. Again, if it's an existing commitment in writing, a written agreement, it would not be subject to the measure. And as I said, most projects are likely to be plan amendments in any event, so they would, in that case, be subject to the voter approval requirement anyway. I know that many might prefer that the effect of the amendments on existing projects might be explained in greater detail. As I've said, the ballot title is gone. It was beyond review, appeal, or challenge as of July 27, 2011. An explanatory statement, as the manager indicated, can be written. You'll have to adopt an ordinance to do that, and you'll have to have 2 readings of that ordinance, and you'll have to decide whether you want us to give us direction to write the ordinance so that you can write the explanatory statement. The measure text will appear in the voter's pamphlet. It will not appear in the ballot. Because laws can be very lengthy, this ballot title process is what the voters see. The city can provide neutral information to the voters. It can send it out in water bills if it wishes. It can put it on the city's website, so long as it's neutral and doesn't advocate a particular position. The debate can continue by private persons, by mail, by oral debate, or by other private means, or it can continue in the voter's pamphlet. Those are the options right now that are open to you. So you have 2 issues, the scope and then the indication of future urban renewal plans.
Okay, Commissioner Pauly.
Yeah, the fact that the discrepancy was missed, I feel that we owe it to the voters to explain in an explanatory statement the factual part, because it might appear in the voter's pamphlet with the different sides, but I think that we can be neutral and it should be explained. Maybe they'll dig deeper too and actually read the information to make sure that they can make the decision.
Commissioner Moon.
Okay, so when we had this before us at the last meeting, I said, is this all that's going to be on there? I had great concerns about it because the way I read it, future means the plan that we have currently is totally fine, and the $130 million are totally fine. We can do with those as we please. That's the way I read it, because it's future. So I do think we need to explain this very clearly to our residents, because if you're only going to go vote on the question is future. A lot of people out there may be pro whatever, and they're thinking, well, in 20 years, then, I mean, that's future. So that's a huge one to me. And I kind of wanted to know when you recognized your own writing.
Oh, I knew it immediately. Once it was submitted in July of 2011, and that was only 6 months after that same writing was before the commission, I knew that they had taken exactly what I wrote, and I knew it was word for word.
Okay, so I'm thinking that there's a lawsuit that will be occurring, in my opinion, because I think litigation's coming down one way or the other, and I personally think that we need to have kind of more of a neutral person, somebody that didn't write this, take this job on. And are the appendant going to be going with the explanatory? I mean, what else will be in the voter's pamphlet?
It'll be the ballot title, the explanatory statement if you choose to use it, and the text of the amendment.
And one other thing that can be in there, but not necessarily, are statements for and statements against.
Right, that's totally
Those,
separate.
as far as you're concerned.
That's totally
Those
separate.
can be, just for edification, those can be by private individuals. They're not going to be by
Right.
city employees
Right.
or staff
Just the
or any
factual.
resources of the city. They can be by individual commissioners. They can be by individual citizens,
Right.
Chamber of Commerce, different groups. for and
I
against.
get that.
Okay.
So I was at one meeting, and one of the petitioners was up there talking about how she was wanting to make sure that the $130 million was put before the voters, okay? That is not what this individual said when she was sitting there. But that doesn't matter, okay? And I was at the chamber meeting, as was a couple other people, and that they're saying that Ed wrote this. Mr. Sullivan wrote this for them.
not for them. I voted for you.
But I'm telling you, that's what's going on in our community, and I think we need to also clearly state that your attorney, our attorney, is still here for us, to protect us, and he did not write that for those people to put into their measure. So I think that's a confusion in our community going on.
They took the liberty of using your
Which they could do.
words.
Well, it's a public
Yeah.
document,
Right.
so anybody can
issue.
use it.
Right, but when you're sitting there and saying, the city attorney wrote this.
No, I didn't hear that. Well, they said he wrote it, but I didn't hear he say he wrote it for them.
Well, yeah, but as we
There's a
all
difference
know
in
how
those two.
it goes.
Well, there's a
In the
difference in saying he
fourth
wrote it for them and that he wrote it.
Right, and I'm not going to tomato because it's going to get thrown out there either way. But I just think we need to do the neutral, the statement. Personally, I don't want this coming back on us. They had one intention and we didn't.
I have a question. Am I?
Well, I put myself
Oh,
on.
go ahead.
Hit the
I'll
button.
put myself on it.
First of all, I'm confident that our attorney can write a neutral explanatory statement. That's not a concern of mine. I think it's essential we have one because I want to avoid any legal
I do
issues.
too.
I think it's before us. The question I have is the explanatory statement, I presume it is, directly under the summary? It's on a different page itself?
It's not in the ballot.
It's not on the ballot, it would be in the voter's pamphlet.
It's in the voters' pamphlet only.
Yeah. But it would be on the same page as the summary?
Depends on how the county clerk
Yeah.
puts it together.
It all depends.
So that the fact is that we have the same issue with
It'll be in the same grouping.
Yeah, in the same grouping, we have the same issue that somebody who only reads the title but
just
may
gonna
not look
vote.
at the
Yeah.
explanatory
Yes.
statement.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have that statement to clear up the apparent inconsistency between the ballot title and what's in the measure. And now I have Commissioner Robb.
Oh, how'd I get up there so quick? Okay. My question is, I'm sure that Ed can write a neutral statement also, but I'm wondering if that's going to be contested. How do we know that that's going to be perceived as neutral, or it doesn't come out as a city election or campaigning if we're putting it in water bills and all of that stuff?
I don't think a neutral statement falls under any of the campaigning stuff. You can't advocate a yes or no vote. You can explain what it does.
Okay.
And you're free.
Now, to be clear, anyone can make a complaint to the Secretary of State's office that an explanatory statement is advocating. And my very strong recommendation to our city attorney is that he sends that explanatory statement down there for sort of a pre-approval to make sure that it meets all the neutrality conditions,
We've done that in the past.
which have changed a lot, even in the last 3 years.
Every word.
Even in the
They've
last
had
3
staff
months.
changes in the last 3 months down there that have vastly changed their interpretations that
Now,
they
let's
were
be
using.
clear
just
what we need to do. We need to have actually an ordinance or a code statement that comes first. So we have to give direction for that to happen.
Right.
So do I hear a motion to that effect? Because we'll have to see it at our next commission meeting at the latest, I presume.
Well, you may want to do special meetings.
Okay, but the point is that within our regular scheduled meetings, probably the next regular commission meeting would be the only place we could see it unless we
Mayor,
had
my
a-
suggestion to you would be that you make a motion that has two parts. One, directing the staff to, as quickly as possible, advance the creation and adoption of the ordinance. And number two, the second part of that motion is to proceed with preparation of an explanatory statement.
Just one clarification. Once we've done that, does that require us to put an explanatory statement on any measure we put forward? Because the wording I heard, okay,
It's only authorizing.
okay, very good. So, do I hear a so moved from someone?
So moved.
Touch the screen.
Oh,
Yeah, right. On the floor here. Do I see a second?
Second.
it didn't.
Never mind.
It didn't do it.
That's fine.
Okay.
So we have Commissioner Munn making the motion, and I believe Commissioner Pauly seconding. Any other further discussion or comments?
We have public comments, I think.
I don't see him here.
Oh, I thought we did.
I don't see him here.
Not on. Not on the
Did
notes.
you, is that a hand raised? Okay, so be sure to fill out the form and come forward. Is there anybody else that wishes to comment on this? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay.
Actually, I'd only signed. My name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. I had signed a citizen comment card, but
and
going to be
you're on that.
And now I'm on that. Regardless of the position of pro or con on the issue, I am grossly disappointed in how this process has occurred. I'm disappointed that if there are statements such as, well, this explanatory statement could be sent to the Secretary of State or the elections or whoever down in Salem makes these callings on whether it's fair or not. It seems to me as though we could have done the same thing with the ballot statement, with the explanatory, with the question, and with the Senate planners. I guess that's all water under the bridge. It's going to be on the ballot one way or the other.
Yes.
Not one way or the other, the way that it was written. I think we have a sincere obligation to try as hard as possible to explain to the voters how misleading the measure is written and how misleading the question does not match the city charter proposed. The city charter to me is a pretty important document. It's not something you mess with, casually. And I think
that won't be in our explanatory statement. Yeah, you as a citizen can say something to that.
Thanks very much, and I am saying that. I am saying that as a citizen. I think that one should not take changes to the city charter lightly any more than one would take a change to the Constitution of the United States lightly. These are important documents, and the fact that we have a measure to alter our city charter, it really distresses me. And I think it distresses me the most because it's a fait accompli. It's a done deal. The wording is out there. It got passed. I will make a comment about the process that I was totally unaware of, about the announcement of the approval of the signatures was announced in the Oregonian. My suspicion it was not put out as a press release. It was not really. I understand that's legal notification, but unless someone were sitting on that constantly, most people were not aware that this was happening. I certainly was not aware that it was happening. In short, all I can say is I'm really disappointed at the process, about the way it unfortunately shed some questionable light on our city attorney, who has always been fair and neutral to us, and I am concerned about potential litigation. Some developer could say that this whole thing was a sham, and I won't say it's a sham, but I will say it's a shame.
Thank you. Commissioner Mum, I have you on.
I'm sorry, I'll withdraw.
Okay. We've gone ahead. Can I have the roll call, please, unless there's some further discussion.
Commissioner Pauley?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
And passes 5-0.
Thank you. Now, we're coming now to citizen comments for items that are not on the agenda. And do we have Mr. Gifford is here before us? That must have been made the same thing. She probably got under citizen comments as opposed to under here. Seeing none, we've got I will inform you, item 7C is being pulled. And with that and the fact that we've taken an item that was effectively under the discussion later on and put it forward, is there any other changes that you want in terms of the agenda, the consent agenda? Hearing none, we'll proceed. Public hearings. AN 1204, annexation of .89 acres within the urban growth boundary at 14362 Maple Lane Court. And I believe then that Mr. Conkle will be speaking, but then I'm wrong. But I'm going by what's in front of me, and I see that Peter Walter will be speaking.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Annexation 1204 is a resubmittal of an identical annexation that was before you last year. The address of this property is 14362 South Maple Lane Road. Parcel consists of 0.89 acres. The applicant is Gary Bowles, represented by Tom Sissel of Sissel Engineering, who are both here tonight. The owner of the property is Gary Bowles, I'm sorry. And I'll just give you a brief summary of the application. Previously was submitted as AN 1103 and was approved by the City Commission. However, the annexation was not approved by the voters. So they've resubmitted the annexation for this year with the hope and intent of getting on the November ballot. It consists of one tax lot of approximately 0.89 acres. There's an existing site which includes one house with some outbuildings. There are no wetlands or water resources on the site. Has access by 2 driveways on Maple Lane Court. And sewer, water, and storm sewer availability in Maple Lane Court and Maple Lane Road. Comprehensive plan designation is low-density residential, and the current Clackamas County zoning is FU10, Future Urban 10. Property has been in the urban growth boundary since 1979, and if the annexation is approved by the voters, the property may be zoned, following the voters' approval, to single-family residential designation of R10, single-family. Property is contiguous to the city and does not create any county islands, and no development is proposed. And the property applicant has submitted two reports for compliance with the transportation planning rule. So no additional transportation analysis is necessary in order to approve a rezoning to R10 following the voter approval. This is aerial photography of the site, which shows it is at the intersection of Maple Lane Road and Maple Lane Court. This graphic shows the relationship between the city's city limit and you can't see the urban growth boundary on this graphic, but it's to the north. Annexation of this property would actually shorten the city boundary. It was a comment made by a planning commissioner at the previous hearing, because you're essentially taking a triangle and just annexing across the top of the property, and it would be a contiguous annexation. This is a utility graphic of where the water, sewer, and stormwater facilities currently exist to serve. So the Planning Commission and the City Commission are review annexations against the following 7 factors for annexation in Chapter 14 of our code. We also look at compliance with the Oregon Revised Statutes, Sections 222 and Metro Code 309. We look at whether or not there are natural hazards or natural features on the property, and whether there would be any impact due to the annexation on those, and any adverse effects due to urbanization of the subject property at the time of annexation. And based on a finding of adequacy of all these factors, the Planning Commission voted to recommend approval of this annexation to the City Commission this evening. So the recommendation is to approve the staff report that is before you and adopt the findings for file AN 1204. And a separate resolution which would forward the annexation to the voters has been prepared. If the City Commission approves the annexation, then that would be a separate business item before you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the annexation.
Pete,
Yeah.
I have one. Can you go back a few things to that colored map you had?
Utility map?
Well,
or the zoning
that
map?
one right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got it labeled county and all the yellow stuff is city, right?
Light yellow, and yellow is city zoning. Yeah.
Okay, so what's that stuff all around it that's white but doesn't say county?
Let's
Is it
see, I'm
R10
gonna
and R10 and?
use the stuff that says R10?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's city zoned residential R10 property. It's just a light yellow. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sure.
Do you see it?
We'll be making,
I can see it now from yours. I can't see it on mine.
we'll be taking action here, and I think we have to be concerned about issues about whether we've been in contact or anything of this nature.
Let me ask you the usual questions, because we assume that these are land use decisions. Has anybody had a pre-hearing contact about any of the matters at issue tonight?
No,
You're all
other than
shaking.
we saw it the last time.
That's
we
correct.
went through,
That's
yeah.
correct.
No.
Does anybody have an interest in the outcome that would prevent them from making a fair decision? Okay, thank you.
Could you, I mean, I think I know it, but, we've had commission changes and so forth. You talked about it likely being R10, is that correct?
Under a city code for zone changes, annexed properties receive a default zoning to based on their comprehensive plan designation. And if it is LR, it could receive a zoning designation of R10. If the applicant wanted to rezone it to anything differently, they would have to apply for said rezoning.
And that process would
And that would
involve
that would
planning
be a
commission
separate
and-
process involving a planning commission review.
And
of that.
can you
Yeah.
describe for us in terms of perhaps how many units per acre an R10 represents?
At about 0.89 acres, technically based solely on land area, under R10 zoning, there's enough land to do a partition of 3 lots.
3.5 houses.
There are also lot width and length and depth considerations that need to be taken into account, as well as future setbacks for structures and things of that nature, which may preclude a 3-lot partition, and it may end up only being a 2-lot partition if the applicant applies for that.
Commissioner Roth indicated you could build 3.5 structures.
Yeah.
3.56, actually.
Our zoning code also allows accessory dwelling units as a by right, but
Any questions? Does we want to hear from the applicant then? Yeah, if you want to speak.
Good evening. My name is Tom Sissel. My address 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. And as Pete pointed out, Mr. Bowles is sitting behind me and is here tonight if you have any questions specifically for him. Just as a note of why we're back again, speaking of the voters' pamphlet and everything, this 0.9 or 0.89 acre annexation request was right next to a very controversial application annexation request, and
Yes.
the picture of this one appeared with the wording of that one, and so Mr. Bowles, like everyone else, is hoping to retire someday and would like to be able to get this into the city and have potentially it be sold. As we look at the parcel, and I'll be brief here this evening, Pete's already pointed out that this will actually shorten the boundary between the city and county. And it makes sense in that regard. It's also the only parcel within that block bounded by Maple Lane Court, Maple Lane Road, and Beaver Creek that is not currently in the city. So this would, if brought into the city, this would complete the block within the city. As noted, it's zoned R10 on both sides of it, and that's how it'd be zoned without some sort of further procedure in front of the city. So Mr. Bowles is requesting that the City Commission allow this to go back in front of the voters again. Hopefully we'll have a better position in the voters' pamphlet, and he will have better success this time. If you have any questions, Mr. Bowles or I would be happy to answer them.
Do you want to come over and have a few words, or do you just want to wait and see if you have questions? Well, why don't you just step up and you can speak or not? But
I'm Gary Bowles. Basically, I bought that property.
Go ahead and have a seat.
In the country, and the city's come to me. Figured I might as well get the benefits of it.
Sure.
City Center #1.
Any question, Mr. Sissel, or the owner? Hearing none. Go ahead. It's not a. we'll see if we've got any comments here. I see William Gifford is wishing to speak.
Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners, my name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I have a little concern about this annexation, and the concern is this. That property is in the urban renewal boundaries, yeah?
It's urban
Yeah,
growth.
It's, I'm sorry, urban growth boundary. It's UGB.
I
usually just say UGB, and I don't try to think of what those words. Those letters, yeah, just UGB. It's within the urban growth boundary, and it does complete the picture. And the property owner is asking to be incorporated. This is not the city encroaching on someone's private property. The property owner is asking to be put on this.
Right.
I guess the only concern that I have is that that there is an anti-annexation perspective in the fact that I think that there may be some voters that don't understand the value of incorporating property into the city, especially with the owner's consent, and how that increased property values funds our schools and makes safer not just police and sewer and all the other amenities. And when a property owner asks to be annexed into the city, it doesn't seem as though there should be a whole lot of discussion about it. And that's my concern, that there shouldn't be a whole lot of discussion about it. Just do it.
Thank you.
And if you want to write a ballot, a statement in favor of the annexation, you can do that, too.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity.
I agree with you. Oftentimes it's brought up that growth doesn't pay for itself, but if somebody built let's say my house is worth $200,000 and the new house is built worth $300,000, the person that built that new house is going to pay quite a bit more in taxes than I am because of the Measure 5, 10 things that have come before us. So actually, those people that build houses now actually pay more taxes than we that have been here for several years. That's just a comment. Anyway, with that, do I have a motion?
I'll move, but I can't move.
You can, well, you can move. You can move.
I don't know if you could listen and talk.
This is what move.
Now, the motion is actually to bring this before us, right?
Yes.
In a form,
Right.
so, yeah, we'll be seeing it again.
Well, you'll see it on the next item. What you're doing now is dealing with the land use, and you would approve that order, and then separately you would deal with the election issue.
Right, okay. So I do have a motion to approve the land use application.
Second.
I got it. Who's the motion?
Kathy.
Okay. Commissioner Mumm made the motion, and Commissioner did I say that
Other
wrong?
way around.
Commissioner Roth made the motion, and Commissioner Mumm made the second. The vote, please.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye. We'll go on then to an ordinance of introduction of
It's resolution.
resolution, excuse me, regarding the annex, referring this to the this to the voters. And I'm not sure we have to. Do we have to have another discussion about it, other than knowing it has to?
No, I can briefly discuss what the resolutions do. You have resolution number
1226.
1226 before you. You've already made the decision on the annexation, meeting your factors for annexation. This resolution forwards the ballot title and ballot title language with the measure and the question to the voters and sets the election date.
Any further discussion? I hear a
Nope.
motion.
Move to approve. I can't get back there, but
Second.
That was moved by Commissioner Mumm, seconded by Commissioner Pauly. The vote, please.
Commissioner Pauly?
Aye.
Commissioner Mum?
aye.
Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Neely?
Aye.
Motion passes
I
5-0.
just make a comment. The commission itself can reject an annexation.
Can.
It can. it would not then go to the voters. We approve then, if we approve an annexation, I would say that any time we have a unanimous consent in terms of land use, you have no indication as to any reason that it shouldn't be taken to the voters. Is that? I mean, we could do it, but the logic, I don't.
I prefer, though, to keep the two things separate. The
Yes,
land
no,
use
I
and
understand.
the election
I
stuff.
understand
Okay.
it. The point is, if there are objections on the part of the commission to it,
Right.
it should probably be brought up at the land use stage.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to influence the vote or anything, but I think that would be the normal.
Could we do these on the consent agenda?
Yes.
You could do them on the consent agenda.
But however,
If
Well,
there's
go ahead.
unanimous,
Yes.
would you like us to put us on the consent agenda to speed this along?
if the land use decision is unanimous, we could probably do that.
Yes.
All we're doing is setting a date.
Yep.
But, okay.
Perfect.
All right,
Thank you.
That's fine. However, that's not what we have at this time.
It's not. Probably won't see him for about another year and a half,
And we have
so
the
until the
motion
next
and
free
the
ones
second.
come around.
And we've already passed it, actually.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll go on to ordinance 12-1006, pavement cut. Oh, no, that's the one.
That's pulled.
That's pulled. That's the one that's pulled.
Did you do both 1225 and
You
12?
have a
we only
second
did one.
resolution.
No.
You have two.
Oh, we didn't
We're on
pull.
7B. 7B.
7B.
Yes.
Did we have the motion in second, though?
What's
Not yet.
A.
what's the difference here?
Well,
This is putting it, put it on,
Different annexation.
referring
This
to
is
the
the-
voters.
It's a different annexation.
It's a different
Oh, I'm
annexation.
sorry, excuse me, my apologies. Now we've got before us resolution regarding annexation proposal referring to a legal vote, the question of approving annexation proposal 1204. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Neely. So 1204 is the resolution setting the ballot title, language, and date for annexation 1204, which you just approved
That's what I
tonight.
meant.
Thanks.
That's what I thought. Okay. Motion?
move to approve?
I see some confusion. The previous resolution was for an annexation that you approved at your last hearing.
Right, okay, okay.
So you have two ballot titles, so we have a total
Okay.
of 4 going up in November.
Okay.
Need a second?
Who made the,
Second.
Commissioner Monk.
okay, Commissioner Mumman made the motion, and Commissioner, just a minute, Company Smith is a second. Go ahead and do the vote. please.
Commissioner Pauly.
Aye.
Commissioner Mum.
Aye.
Commissioner Roth.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Neely.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
And I guess, yeah, that was my point. I guess the time to object on the commission level was when it comes to us as a land use piece. And, okay, now we pulled C, correct?
Yes.
And now we're in for ordinance for introduction, number 12-1007 of the Oregon City Municipal Code, amending chapter 8.10 related to some kind of waste, solid.
Solid.
waste. Yes, solid waste. And we're going to have, as a speaker,
Yes.
it will be Mrs. Bush.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. I have Donnie Anderson Jr. here as well, who is representing B&B Leasing, which is Oregon City Garbage Company. The ordinance amendment, the changes to the ordinance, is somewhat of a housekeeping issue and clarifying a couple of, clearing up some of the language. So on, let me see where we're at. Section 2 of the 8.20040 would amend the wording in F. Yes, 3F. I believe that is. I think I have my wrong copy.
Wait a minute, what's the,
And I'm going to explain that to you in just a second.
what's the page you're looking at?
4, I think.
One that I actually had highlighted, which I didn't seem to make it in my copy here. Under F, it talks about a person who engages in an occupation of construction contractor for a property. Oops. I'm sorry, I apologize. Oh, yes, F. Okay, a person who engages in the occupation of such as a gardener, landscaper, groundskeeper, construction contractor, The property owner or tenant for the city who produces thereby small volumes of solid waste as a result of such work for a property owner or tenant in the city may transport such solid waste in such person's own equipment where the solid waste produced is incidental to the particular job the person is performing. Now, what we come across in code enforcement when it comes to solid waste and enforcement of the franchise, there's no definitions for small volumes or incidental, and that seems to be where we have a hard time explaining the rules of the franchise. In addition to that, also in Section F, we were removing, or separating, I should say, the gardener, landscaper, and groundskeeper from the construction contractor. And that being because with the frequency that they're coming to your home, usually your yard debris is already paid for with your garbage service. So one, the garbage company isn't probably having to service the home as often. And if they wanted to haul their own debris away like most landscapers do, the garbage company is okay with that. And we didn't want the construction contractor to kind of get in that back and forth of, but the gardeners hauling their own, how come we can't haul our own construction debris? So it really kind of all revolves around Section 2F. And then we are creating another, in the clean copy, G, separates landscaper and groundskeeper to remove the yard debris generated by performing such services in their own equipment. The garbage company is not out any revenue, and the yard debris currently comes with garbage service, as I stated. So it's a few, kind of a housekeeping for code enforcement.
Okay.
Does that make... Franchise is really hard to understand. It's hard for most people when you're going out and talking to them. But when you can point to a definition that says clearly what a small volume is, that tends to trip people up. And we created the small volume to be an amount not to exceed 2,000 pounds. That is something that probably 10 years ago Bill Kabeisman told me verbally, and we have enforced it this way, the franchise this way, for my entire employment here. And then, let me see. And then also recognizing with the incidental, the Metro license that one can purchase instead of obtaining the city business license. We'd recognize both contractors or even landscapers, for that matter, may come into the city and not realize that they do have to have a business license if they're working. The Metro license allows you, if you are grossing less than $250,000 a year, that you can obtain a license through Metro, so you don't have to hold a license in every city that you're performing work in. So it's just kind of cleaning things up for us.
Can I ask a question about, is this G or H? I don't know which this is. It talks about tires.
Oh, we're not touching anything with that.
H
We're
stays
only,
the same.
yeah.
It's the underlying pieces, I think, are the changes.
It's just in that F section, which seems to kind of trip us up,
Okay,
and
because it was scratched out here.
we wanted to separate the groundskeeper and yard maintenance, and then come up with some definitions for the small volumes, and because we didn't have any before.
So kind of, show me that.
I'm going to get off of this and see who's on the floor. I've got a question, too. But
Sorry.
Eddie Munn?
So can you kind of tell me, for an example, kind of how this came to be, and what would be an actual situation that you would have to deal with?
Well, anytime that it's summertime, so you're having a lot of home improvement, a lot of construction going on, and you're going to have a lot of drop boxes probably coming into the city from outside the area. It is currently, it is a violation of the franchise, which most understand, and they don't want to, and it's nice if we can really clarify that with just some wording. We've had...
So then I could, as a resident, I could call Portland or Gresham and have them bring me a drop box? Is that what you're saying?
You cannot bring, currently, you cannot have anybody else bring a drop box into the city.
Okay.
It's the franchises to B&B.
Okay.
This is just clarifying. The franchise is going to make it a little bit easier for us to explain, and to the average citizen for us to explain.
Absolutely.
A lot of the drop box companies it's kind of smoke and mirrors, where they're going to give it to you for, they'll tell us that they're donating it for free, but you're paying for it in the one way or the other.
Right.
And that transaction of money or trading belongs to our franchise, the garbage company.
Right, because nothing's for free.
Nothing is for free.
Question, you mentioned definition was here. I don't see really a definition of what a small volume is. Or am I wrong? Am I missing it?
Well, we didn't have one prior, and
Just before solid waste.
Yeah, means amount not to exceed 2,000 pounds.
Oh, okay.
2,000 pounds,
Version, yeah.
and that was
Page
based
2.
on your average size.
Okay, I missed that.
1-ton truck is 2,000 pounds, and so a very small job, or if unexpected waste, as long as you could haul it in your own truck, but you can't bring a big drop box in for construction, or unless it is some type of charitable event and that the garbage company is given advance notice, and that's stated in our franchise. So we're not making any other changes, but just kind of clarifying that. And again, Donnie is here if anybody
And this
has any
has been a
questions.
problem for us.
It has been a problem. It is
Okay.
more so in the summertime. Every now
Okay.
and then we'll get a big company who wants to go, battle with lawyers, and it's over definitions. And if we simply
Yes.
had a definition, we get to fax that off and say, there's a better
It's
way
always
to
the
us all spend
lawyers.
our money.
You know how that is.
I missed the last part that you just said. In terms of city cleanups or events, say what you were just saying about that. That's a separate.
The franchise, the garbage company donates, actually, our franchise garbage company donates all of that. For the most part, right? Absolutely. We work very closely together with code enforcement.
Yes, yes.
Just so we're all protocol, you've been introduced as Donnie, but would you state your actual name?
Actually, I'm Donnie Anderson with Oregon City Garbage Company. Pam is sorry that she couldn't be here tonight. She had another obligation, but I'm representing the company, so
Thank you.
actually I was hoping I could have to come up here, but
Well, you can
That's
choose
good
to
for
say
you.
nothing if you want to. That's up to you.
Can I go back to ask another question? Because
Absolutely.
it's not directly, but back to H. And when I went back and read the definition of person, I'm a person.
H.
Yeah, and it says to dispose of a tire, you have to have a permit? So I can't get rid of a tire?
H was simply, nothing has changed there.
I know nothing's changed,
Yes.
but I'm just concerned that I can't get rid of a tire. I don't have one, but
Yeah,
Well, I do.
You can get rid of a
Can I
tire,
give it
but
to
if you're
you?
going to get rid of multiple tires, I think some of it comes down to load. And if you looked up to the ORS, it would probably clarify. I didn't really come prepared to speak on H. We don't
Yeah.
really do much with that.
Okay.
Metro kind of helps regulate those.
okay.
actually, if I may,
Yeah.
tires are actually probably one of the most things that you'll see thrown out alongside the road.
Yes.
Because they actually are the hardest thing to get rid of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Metro really, they do deal with them, but they
I thought I could just go there and pay them and they would take it.
you can, but
But I was reading,
I heard earlier that nothing's for free.
Yes.
right,
Tires are a pretty big expense to get rid of.
but I just was reading this to say that I couldn't even do that.
Oh yeah, you
Give them to a registered.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't have to be a registered person to
No,
take it down there.
You don't have to. No.
Okay. Whew. Betty, we can go.
Woo, let's go. Party aid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing? Good?
With that, well, here, it's an ordinance.
What are we doing?
All right.
You want me to do the first reading?
Yeah, and if we're ready for the first reading, I have to have a motion.
Okay.
I don't see any public comment.
Oh, okay. So I move to,
First reading of ordinance 12-1007.
thank you. Move what
Second.
Ed said.
This is ordinance 12-1007, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City amending Chapter 8.20 of the Oregon City Municipal Code related to definitions for solid waste collection and disposal exceptions from franchise.
We'll see this at a subsequent, we got to take the vote now.
Sorry, who was the second? I didn't hear a second. Oh, okay.
Commissioner Mum, go ahead and state who they are, please.
Motion by Commissioner Mum, second by Commissioner Roth.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Pauly.
Aye.
Commissioner Mum.
Aye.
Commissioner Roth.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Neely.
Aye. Usually I forget to ask for the first reading. This time I was going to forget to ask for the vote. But anyway, this will be coming to us then at a subsequent commission meeting.
Thank you.
Second reading.
Thank you.
Okay. And now, if I'm not mistaken, get on to my agenda here. We're now, I think, in the consent agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
I'll choose Commissioner Smith to my right
Thank you.
here, and second by Commissioner Pauly. Is that correct?
Mum.
Commissioner, I thought you both made the motion. I thought you made the motion.
And then Rocky did it, and I said second.
Oh, did you? Right on top of it. Very good.
Very quickly.
Okay.
I move very quickly.
The vote, please.
Commissioner Pauly.
Aye.
Commissioner Mum.
Aye.
Commissioner Roth.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Mayor Neely.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Very good. And with that, we'll go on to communications, beginning with the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, it's that time again for the quarterly goals progress report. I have copies of that I want to distribute tonight to the commission. There are no less than 11 pages on both sides of progress on your goals. So if you will, please review that. And after you've read that at your leisure, let me know if you have any questions about the progress on your goals.
We can ask those questions at a subsequent meeting.
Or you can...
I don't know if we'll read them right
You don't have to wait until the subsequent meeting. Please don't wait, because we want to know what your feedback is on those goals, on the progress in the goals. Also, I want to... really, Tom Giles not here, but at the last commission meeting, he came forward and said something, and I was a little bit confused by it, but it indicated to me that as a CIC member, he may be interested in the CIC somehow endorsing or holding some educational forums, both for and against this ballot measure that's circulating out there. And I just want to make sure that I confirm with the commission your understanding and then what the staff's understanding is, and anyone who's listening, including Mr. Guile, that once this measure goes on the ballot, which has happened, you've referred it. So even though it's not on a ballot, technically you've referred it. Once that happens, that triggers all these other prescriptions on the staff's activities. So Mr. Gile's naturally free to do whatever he wants as a private citizen regarding educating people for and against. That I think the mayor might have mentioned this, but the operative language is that once this is referred, the staff cannot use city resources, city staff time, and we cannot advocate except in our individual capacity personally for or against. So what I hear sometimes people use is common sense when they talk about how the Secretary of State looks at this. It isn't necessarily common sense. Common sense would tell Mr. Guile and others, well, if we have a forum on this, and we have a person from this side and a person from that side, and both sides are given equal time to talk about it, then we've done a fair and open and honest educational effort, and that's a good thing. I agree, but the Secretary of State does not. Those rules do not apply to the city's resources, its staff, and its facilities. So we cannot advocate for or against. Commissioners are largely exempt from those requirements. You can pretty much say anything you want to about these various measures. We can't.
At the dais?
You can say what you want, pretty
As an
much,
individual.
as an individual.
But not here as a commissioner.
You can.
You can say things at the dais.
As long as you're only representing yourself. But,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But
So the prescription is, the concern I have is I don't want, like if Mr. Guile wants to set one of these up on his own, that's fine, but if he says it's CIC and it's going to be at City Hall and staff's going to be there to give you arguments for and against, we're not going to be doing that.
No, I don't think you can.
I don't think that's what, because he's already talking about a different venue.
He was talking about the college.
And he may be, but others have indicated to me that they'd like to have these debates and they want to bring a certain amount of resources, staff knowledge, and things to bear. And we can provide factual information, but I'm largely going to do that on the advice of council and at the request of city commissioners. So I'm just a little nervous about us not getting embroiled in that. So that caveat, and it wasn't necessarily directed at Mr. Guile. It was just that his comments made me think about maybe it's a good idea to announce again what the requirements are. Can't use city resources, staff time, or facilities to advocate for or against a ballot measure. So also want to call on Tony Conkle. He's got a couple things to talk to you about regarding the sign code and a question about Walmart, which I think you've all been inundated with. Mm-hmm. So, Tony.
Thank you. Evening. I believe that probably all the commissioners and the mayor, as well as myself, are receiving emails concerning Walmart. So I am keeping all of those as I receive them. So there was a separate website set up that requests folks to submit comments, and then they're automatically sent to all of you as well as myself. So just an update. We had a pre-app meeting with representatives from Walmart who own the property up there on Hilltop. To date, there's been no land use application submitted. But we do want to caution you that you are the hearing body of appeals. Right. So whether it's my decision or a planning commission decision, we're not sure what type of an application, if they do submit at some point, it would be. But if that is appealed, which I would imagine it probably would be, that you would be the hearing that. And so I think Mr. Sullivan probably has some words of wisdom for moving forward.
It's not clear in the law whether before the application is actually submitted that you're bound by the pre-hearing contacts rule. I would suggest that you apply it anyway. So don't talk to anybody even before the application is filed. If I understand that Tony will get a copy of all the communications that are going to you, and we'll put them and make them available in a file and talk about them when it comes to any pre-hearing contacts if the matter comes before you. Another thing to think about, you are also looking at possible negotiations with Walmart as a property owner. And if you do that, it might be a good idea to amend your code and to give the decision to a hearings officer. You have that authority under state law.
Yeah, they don't have to amend the code to do that. They can refer it, can't they?
No, I think we have various ways in 1750 for things that have to go to particular officers or bodies. I would recommend that you amend the code so that you can refer out items such as this. And that can be done fairly quickly. And then I guess the third thing is just to be careful when you discuss this stuff, because there are creative people out there who can make a lot out of a little thing, and just be careful.
And I guess I would just clarify, if the decision is made that we are going to send this to a hearings officer, if that's something that we would like to do, that clears you of commenting and being involved in the application process, because you are not part of the decision making at then.
I'm going to just, before we have a discussion whether we do this, I'd like a distinction between type 1, type 2, and type 3 land hearings, and what the process is. A quick one, but I don't.
It's not but the point 30 seconds.
I'll do it that now.
Here's my concern. My concern is when we have something that is a major land use decision that comes through the Planning Commission.
Yep.
It can be appealed to the City Commission.
Yep.
Now, when you're talking about a hearings officer, are you talking about something that applies to all three categories?
No.
And that's why I think that's why we need to hear a description of type 1, type 2, type 3 land decisions.
Well, what we'd be looking at here is either a type 2 decision, which is a decision that I make as the community development director. It involves limited discretion. Potentially, their application, they're potentially probably going to be doing a master plan, or there may be a conditional use associated with that. So that would go to the Planning Commission. And at that point, there'd be a public hearing, and the Planning Commission would make the decision.
Type 3.
Type 3. Okay, my decision is a type 2. There's no public hearing. We only take written comments. But my decision is appealable under current code to the City Commission. The Type 3 type of review, which would go to the Planning Commission, they make a decision, and their decision is appealable to the City Commission. Your decision is then appealable to LUBA, and then on up the chain. So that's the distinction. So what we'd be proposing is that whether it's my decision or the Planning Commissioner's decisions, that if it's appeal, the appeal would go to a hearings officer rather than the City Commission.
And here's my concern. I would not want to be put in a position where you've said on many occasions the City Commission interprets its code.
Correct.
And particularly on a Type 3 decision, I wouldn't feel at all comfortable with a Type 3 decision appealed out from the Planning Commission going to hearings officer. I have a problem with that.
Okay. I mean, it's your discretion. You have that authority under ORS Chapter 227 to arrange the kinds of hearing officers and body. Just to fill in, Type 1 is a decision involving no discretion, a building permit. And then Type 4 are legislative type, when you're amending a plan or the code.
So, and that's why I wanted that distinction there. And that
perhaps you might want to have a work session on it. Just
think about it for a while.
Think about it, yeah. Right. And it's not a problem of no changing the goalpost, because you're not changing the standards. You're changing just the person's authorized to hear it.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be applicable to a single retailer. If you do it, it's everybody.
That's right.
It's everybody.
Right.
So,
That's right.
yeah. Okay. So also at a previous meeting, Commissioner Roth brought up the idea of how we could keep better track of future agenda items on behalf of the commission so that you could see it. And Nancy's got a solution that she thinks will work for us.
Yes, as you know, recently you asked for a list or an addendum to the agenda that where it would list all the future agenda items that you have requested over the last, up until the current. And we discussed this in staff meeting on what would be the best way to present this to you. And we keep a list of all upcoming agenda items, and on that list are all of the future agenda items that you've recommended. And so we're just going to extract those that you've requested and put them on another spreadsheet. And then after the work session each month, because that's where you have future agenda items on the work session where you give more, and then it would be mid-month about that time. And once a month, mid-month, we will present you with that spreadsheet. So being that this is mid-month now, I'm going to be getting that to you just via email real soon.
Great, and so things will just roll off of it as they...
Right, and we'll just update it regularly, and you'll see those things. And they have been coming onto the agenda, and then they drop off our list.
Right, thank you.
So that's how we're going to handle it.
So they roll off and they roll on.
Yeah.
And we keep moving. Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. Also, Scott Archer has informed me just a minute ago by email that the Pioneer Community Center, as many of you know, it's projected to be over 100 degrees tomorrow here in Oregon City, and the Pioneer Community Center will be open late tomorrow as a cooling site for anyone who needs to remain cool. So we would encourage you.
Are they going to serve cold drinks?
I don't know about the beverage situation, but the air should be cool in the Pioneer Center tomorrow.
I'll check it out.
Bring your own, I would suggest. Yeah.
Don't say that.
You really want to say that?
Don't say that.
It's amazing what these interim department heads will come up with. So, also, I want to remind the commission that we have the BTOP mediation coming up with the Clackamas County. We have suggested a neutral site for them. They suggested earlier that it be held at the county. We suggested a neutral site, and then they said, well, fine, do you want to have it at City Hall? We suggested a neutral site. If they want to come to City Hall, that's fine. So that's what we're working on, and I think, Mayor, you have a couple of people who've gleefully volunteered for giving up a day of their life to this negotiation process, mediation process. So.
I will be appointing them. I wanted to speak to both of them, and I haven't had the opportunity to do so. But the people that indicated the availability, I believe, are Commissioners Mumm and Commissioner Pauly have indicated that they would be available on those dates. generally wouldn't be that much of an issue, because I think we thought we'd be talking for an hour or two, but the county recommended a full day. So anyway, we'll see. But in any case, I want to talk to them both individually.
Sounds very good. Okay.
And
And then,
I want to make, Norman would have the commission president as a representative, but he has a major scheduling conflict.
It's called work.
It's called work. And he would not be able to make it. But under normal circumstances, I would ask the president of the commission to come with me to those kinds of meetings.
and then last but not least, the library is going to be closed on August 23rd for a staff day. And they're going to spend the morning doing lots of staff work, updating policies and learning new staff, I guess, information on their databases and IT. But in the afternoon, they're going to be going to the McLaughlin House, the Friends of the Library Bookstore, the Stevens Crawford House, and the Museum of the Oregon Territory. So they're going to, I think, be better equipped to tell people about our historic assets that are available here in Oregon City. And I believe that's all. No one else has anything? We're good.
I have a few things to report on. I was able to take people may recall we had a tour of Main Street. I was able to take a tour of the Southwest Corridor last Wednesday, and it was interesting. Southwest Corridor is an area that they're looking for perhaps the next rapid transit, or I should say high capacity transit system. We've had the Milwaukee piece come forward. Next in line is the Southwest Corridor. We might be the one after that, but in any case, had a chance to take a tour through that area. And it was a very interesting tour, because it was basically a bus tour moving through the area, but we went through South Portland, on through the areas of King City, of Durham, of Tigard, Tualatin, and Sherwood, and that is the corridor they're talking about, how to have better transit system through that particular area. And got a great deal out of that particular tour. And it occurred to me that maybe not everybody got noticed on that. I know Commissioner Roth did, because she's my alternate at Impact. But were any of the others? Well, I'll make sure. I'm sorry. There will be another tour that'll be coming up next month, and I'll make sure that you're all noticed on that particular tour. And we have coming up City Hall Week. And what City Hall Week is, where the League of Oregon Cities discusses their legislative agendas with various cities, and they'll be coming to West Lynn. It's open to anybody who wants to attend. It's Wednesday, September 19th at West Lynn from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Now, we've submitted, I believe, what was it, four or five items that we submitted in terms of
to the League of Oregon Cities for our legislative priorities, and that's where they're going to have discussion about legislative priorities. The League usually wants to, I think they really want to have a listening session to make sure that they're hearing all the concerns that are among those legislative priorities, and then they use that information that they gather at these public events, and they use it to solidify the actual initiatives that they take legislatively.
In addition to staff recommendations, I got recommendations from Commissioner Roth, I believe Commissioner Mumman, as well as my own, that we've tried to pull together the most frequently brought up subjects, and that's what we submitted. But I was going to request that if you would send us an email of what we actually submitted to the League of Oregon Cities.
Happy to do that.
And what was that date again?
It's again, it's the 19th of September, 7 a.m., West Lynn City Hall.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Things that the Impact is going to... Impact is essentially on a summer break, except it's doing these tours. So the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, that's what Impact is. We have a seat on that particular committee because we're the second largest city in a county. I think a couple of these things I mentioned before, but one was the climate smart communities that will be coming back to us, and it was a statement. There's a little confusion because some of the cities were upset about some kind of a metro mandate. It was not. It was a legislative action that required the metro region, that is our region, to reduce its carbon dioxide emissions from a 4.05 tons per capita. That's hard to imagine, but apparently that's what it was in 2005, and bring it down to a 1.2 tons per capita by 2035. That's probably a 70% decrease over that particular time, and by the end of this year, Metro will be putting together a set of scenarios to meet that. By the end of 2014, we'll be coming up with a preferred scenario. Now, when that was mentioned to me, I kind of said, why do you want a single preferred scenario? I mean, what might work for some communities might not work so well for another, and I suggested that they not narrow down to a single scenario, but perhaps have 3, and maybe even the option for a community that could demonstrate they could meet the requirements by another scenario could do so. I don't know any community would want to do that because it would involve a lot of money to do studies to make that happen. But I'm concerned whenever you're coming up with a decision that brings you down to only essentially one scenario that you're going to operate on that's a concern. The next one, and I think I mentioned this briefly at another meeting, but it'll be coming before us when we open up at the impact meeting, is the Community Investment Initiative, in which we have private and attempt to get private and public entities to work together in terms of addressing issues of infrastructure, development, redevelopment, efficiency of movement of people and goods, and 21st century school facilities. That's what they've listed as their major thing. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is that the last impact meeting that we had, there were discussions about trying to develop a connective corridors between I-84 and Highway 26. And what they're presenting there is not a development of a new bypass or anything, but improving existing corridors to make that connection possible. What was clearly evident in the discussions that were going on that involved, for the most part, Fairview and Troutdale and those other communities in that area is lands that they were considering for industrial purposes. I believe both Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Roth went to these areas when we were looking at waterfront developments and also developments in, I guess, was it Fairview or was it Wood Village? I can't remember, but we were looking at some developments that were occurring in that particular area, and some of those developments abutted some open spaces that were fairly flat, and they're apparently talking about looking at them as those connections for future industrial development. My concern is that Multnomah County, I think, is perhaps getting ahead of us in the process. Washington County is, in terms of industrial lands, and Washington County is already ahead of everybody. And we want to make certain that we are, if this community initiative, this community investment initiative comes forward, we want to make sure we're on the front burner in some of the potential industrial lands that we have here. And so through partnerships working with the county and ourselves, and we've always flagged the lands close to the college as lands that would be very suitable for educational purposes as well as job creation purposes. On the first Monday, Wilsonville has its council meeting, and Nancy Crusher was being introduced at that time, so I went there and spoke. I first of all told him that the Shun Brian Cosgrove month was over. We could then talk to him. I did point out that the actual resolution that I put forward stated that current and former staff members and commissioners should avoid a contact with Brian Cosgrove unless it was absolutely essential for business for Oregon City.
Sounds like you're stealing a line out of another That sounds very much like the Bridge Oregon City Westland resolution.
In any case, I then turned around and looked at Nancy Crushauer, since she was a former staff member, and I said, I hope you haven't had discussion with Brian Cosgrove in that last month. And she was very quiet. I also, of course, extolled her virtues and so forth, pointing out that she got a degree in environmental engineering at the University of Colorado at Boulder, that she had been 12 years in the private sector. She had worked for us for almost 16 years. And I said she's a tremendous asset. And I said I hoped she was going to be a tremendous asset to the city of Wilsonville, and I was very sincere. But I did point out that I did know her age, and we may have got her at the peak of her performance. She might be going downhill.
She might be going downhill. I'm not sure.
The thing I don't know how many people were aware of the position she took there. She is going there not as a public works director, but as a community development director for long-range planning. And this was a great opportunity for her to expand horizons further in her public service. And so, and I understood that when she told me that she, in fact, was going to take that particular position. It was a very hard decision for her to make, but it opened new horizons to her, and it wasn't because they were offering a whole lot of money to her and so forth. It was because, from her standpoint, it was a case of tremendous professional growth. So I'm sure her peak is still coming.
In defense of women Nancy's age, we don't reach a peak.
Right, like fine wine.
You mean you never reach a peak?
That
could be that you're always in a trouble.
We might want to just sidestep that one, Mayor.
Very good. In any case, a couple of other things. We do have vacancies on the Planning Commission and on the Natural Resource Commission, one vacancy each. The City Commission has a position on the Clackamas Heritage Partners Board. I hope they're going to be flexible in terms of doing their meetings, because I want to appoint Rocky Smith to serve in that position. And I hope they can have their meetings either early in the morning or at some time when it's convenient to you.
Early in the morning? How early is it?
To avoid your work.
5 a.m.
Anyway, so my initial appointment, in any case, and unless it just simply can't work out, is to have Rocky Smith, Commissioner Smith, to serve that particular role. Am I missing anything? My city recorder is always there, making sure I don't screw up. Okay. With that, that's my report. Anybody else want to comment?
I would like to say that we had a great national night out. Thank you to the police department and Chris Wadsworth and all of that group. Thank you. It was great. Had a great turnout, I think 650 or something, so it was a great turnout. Mm-hmm. And then we also had a very good turnout for our volunteer night, where we all served our volunteers in the city, so that was another wonderful time. We had good music. And the Antique Fair is coming up on Sunday, the 26th, so everybody attend, please. And the other thing I just wanted to clarify, when we were talking about the urban renewal bond measure thing, I did not mean that Ed could not write the explanatory statement. He's very smart and he could do it. I was just thinking we would be clean just to have a neutral kind of person do that. But that's all I was saying. So that's my report.
Anybody else? Yes,
I have a couple of things. I wanted to say thank you to John Lewis, because I just had this breath of fresh air this afternoon because of John. You sent out an...
You put on the air conditioner?
Yeah. You fixed my air conditioner. Yeah. So, you sent out an email, and even though about the stop sign on 6th And even though he didn't really, he stated that he didn't agree with or find it warranted, he was going to go ahead with it. And I just thought, really, really nice to hear that.
Did you say you were going ahead with it?
No, he was going to go ahead with looking at it.
Oh, okay. That's what I understood. That's what I understood.
He was going to keep it under consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thought that was really, really nice. So thank you.
I think the most important thing is I would like to see, because I've been staffing the Transportation Advisory Committee, TAC, for a while, a little over a year now, and I see so many issues come before this group, and they're not even considering going to the Transportation Advisory Committee. And I think that's the right place to manage these kind of issues. And they do an outstanding job, by the way. That's a good volunteer group. It's now 9 members, which we've been working hard to fill, and one of them sitting in our audience here, so I think they appreciate hearing that stuff, as opposed to this body making that decision.
Well, and also you brought up another point of view, which I had never considered, the fire station's input on this. You know, and all the other.
And there's really 2 takeaways here. One is we'd like to follow the process. We also like to encourage the commission to encourage citizens who come before you without talking to us about that first to follow that process.
Right.
And then the other thing is more, while John's correct and it isn't meeting the warrants, and there's always a concern about that. As a professional engineer, he's got a license to protect and has to be careful what he recommends if it doesn't meet warrants. In this particular case, we do have something that's sort of countering that, which is the fact that the Carnegie Library is there. We've now had input with our staff at our staff meeting, and that's why, had the citizen brought that to my attention first, we would run it through our staff meeting and say, what are you folks hearing? What do we know from the fire department, the police department? Have there been any accidents? And in this case, the library director was seeing a lot of use and had concerns about employees and patrons of the library. Well, when that initial decision was made, we don't think the Carnegie was operating as a library at the time. So when circumstances change, sometimes you make exceptions. And that's really what that is.
Can I make a suggestion that just popped into my head is I believe that most neighborhood groups and private citizens don't know about this process. Is there anything that we have published that would say, okay, you've got a concern here as a neighborhood group, here's where you start?
I'm thinking it's right on our website.
It is. It is. And the CIC is pretty good about letting people know, too.
But we all sort of have this joint responsibility to try to educate people on how to use our local government services most effectively. And we do a lot of that through our website, but we also rely on our staff when people call. We also reach out to them, and I know that Nancy and John is now continuing this tradition that Nancy had of going to a lot of these neighborhood meetings to encourage that kind of communication. But we rely on commissioners too to also let them know to call us first, and we'll try to help.
My second thing is just to remind everybody I'm going to be gone for the first 2 meetings in September.
So that's the first and the last meeting in September.
Well, the first 2 weeks.
Oh, first 2 weeks.
The work session.
Okay.
It's not warm enough in Oregon, so she's
got to go to South Carolina.
Any other business before us?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I would also like to thank Public Works for moving the crosswalk that went to no man's land over by Clackamas Cove, and now it's directly across from the trail. And it's very nice. I noticed that parking lot is getting used now, and that was brought to my attention by a citizen. It was just nice to see that followed through and changed, and I think it makes that area much safer. Before, the crosswalk was immediately around a curve, and it was kind of blind, and there was nowhere for pedestrians to go on either side. So now it's nice and safe, and thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for mentioning that. I'll pass that along to the appropriate.
I was excited to see that.
Anything else?
Do we have an exec meeting?
We do?
Oh.
We do.
We'll adjourn to the executive session.
You'll do that in exec session.
Okay.